Grandpa Simpson was accused of murder. The whole town turned against him. And the worst part, even he began to believe he was guilty. When I watched this episode for the first time, I was shocked because everyone always jokes that Abe is forgetful, confused, clumsy. But no one expected the entire town of Springfield to treat him like a monster. And the most disturbing part, the more people pointed fingers at him, the more Grandpa himself believed he had done something terrible. And this is where one of the darkest and most human stories in the whole series begins. The first thing this episode shows is how an accusation can destroy someone even without evidence. It all begins when a resident of Springfield mysteriously disappears, and the last person seen with him was Grandpa Simpson. The media attacks the story, the town panics, and suddenly everyone decides he is guilty. No body, no proof, no motive. And this teaches something powerful when public opinion chooses a culprit. The truth stops mattering. But the most terrifying part was still coming because Grandpa begins to doubt himself. This part is brilliant. The episode shows how unreliable Abe's memory is. He tries to remember what happened, but every time he closes his eyes, a different version of the story appears. One moment he thinks he argued with the man. Another moment he thinks he accidentally attacked him. And then, at one point, Abe whispers, "Maybe I did it. Maybe I am dangerous." Here the script shows how guilt, even without reason, can corrode the mind. The episode is not actually about murder. It is about abandonment. Because no one in the town stopped to ask how Grandpa was doing. No one heard his side. They just wanted someone to blame, and Grandpa just wanted to be remembered. This story shows how loneliness can make someone believe lies about themselves. So, to recap, Grandpa Simpson was accused without evidence. Springfield chose a culprit before learning the truth. And the saddest part, the victim himself began to believe he was a monster. This Simpsons episode is not just comedy. It is a reminder of how judgment and isolation can destroy a person. If you like these dark and powerful Simpsons stories, make sure to subscribe. Because in the next video, I will tell another controversial episode that very few people remember. And it changed everything in Springfield. And now let's go to the story of the episode. As we begin with a quiet morning in Springfield, where something feels wrong even before anyone speaks, because the entire town wakes up to the shocking news that a local resident has mysteriously vanished during the night. And the last person seen with him was Abraham Simpson, the old man known for getting lost in his own memories, wandering off into stories that nobody believes, and speaking in circles that never end. And suddenly, the town that once ignored him now turns every glance toward him with suspicion, as if a switch flipped in their minds, and they decided that the old forgotten man is now a threat. The police arrive quickly, gathering in front of the Springfield retirement castle where Chief Wiggum announces loudly that Abe Simpson is the primary person of interest, and even though he has no evidence and no clear timeline, the word spread across Springfield like wildfire, and people begin to murmur Abe always acted strange. He talked to himself. He wondered in the dark he could have done something terrible. And with every whisper, the narrative grows stronger and more twisted, turning rumor into truth inside the minds of the frightened citizens inside the retirement home. Grandpa Simpson sits alone on a wooden chair, staring blankly at the wall, trying desperately to remember the previous night, but his mind gives him only fragments, like broken pieces of a puzzle. Scattered across the floor, he sees flashes of walking home. He sees the missing man beside him. He sees shadows moving through the park. He hears distant voices, but the more he tries to hold on to these memories, the more they slip through his fingers. Like sand, and confusion begins to shape fear inside his chest, because he cannot tell what is real and what is only his imagination. And while the police question him, reporters burst through the doors, pushing microphones toward his face, asking questions that swirl around him like a storm of noise and panic. Where were you last night? Did you argue with him? Why can't you remember anything? As the residents of Springfield stand outside, pointing at him, whispering, saying he must have done it. He has that look in his eyes. He cannot be trusted, and slowly, the weight of the accusations begins to bend. The old man's spirit. Homer tries to defend his father, but his attempts only make things worse as he rambles nervously, adding confusion to an already chaotic situation. And Marge watches, horrified as people she has known for years turned their backs on Abe without hesitation, and Bart and Lisa exchange worried glances because deep down they know something is very wrong and that none of this adds up, but the noise of the crowd is stronger than their voices. And then the most heartbreaking moment happens as Abe sits alone in his small room listening to the sound of Springfield chanting outside, calling him guilty, calling him dangerous, calling him a monster. And in that crushing silence, he begins to whisper to himself in a trembling voice, saying, maybe, I did something. Maybe I am the reason this happened. Maybe the town is right. Because if everyone believes, then maybe it must be true. And in that moment, his doubt becomes heavier than the accusation itself. And this is how the story begins, with the entire city turning against a lonely old man, and the man himself starting to believe he is capable of something terrible, simply because everyone around him decided he was. As the investigation deepens, the atmosphere in Springfield becomes heavier and more hostile, and everywhere Grandpa Simpson goes, he feels the weight of 1,000 eyes staring at him with judgment and fear. And even the simplest places, like the Quick E-Mart or the town square, become battlefields where strangers whisper behind newspapers saying things like, I always knew he would snap someday, or old people like him should not be walking around alone. And these voices echo inside Abe's fragile mind, making the shadows of doubt grow larger. At the police station, Chief Wiggum tries to piece together a timeline, but his lack of competence only makes things worse as he looks at a messy whiteboard filled with childish drawings and random notes, none of which lead to anything useful. But this does not stop the townspeople from demanding answers, and soon a crowd gathers outside, holding signs that read justice for Springfield and lock him up even, though no evidence against Abe exists. And when Lou suggests maybe the old man is innocent, Wiggum shrugs and says, well, people seem pretty convinced, so maybe he did something after all, which only fuels the chaos further. Meanwhile, Homer, Bart, and Lisa try to visit Abe in the retirement home, but the residents are terrified of him forming a circle around his room like he is some kind of dangerous creature, and they tell Marge that they do not want him wandering around because they fear he might lash out at any moment, even though Abe sits quietly, barely moving, lost in his own confusion and sadness, and every time he tries to speak, his words tremble like he is afraid of his own voice. At home, the Simpson family tries to piece together what might have happened. Bart suggests that maybe someone is framing Abe, and Lisa adds that it is suspicious how fast the town decided he was guilty. But Homer interrupts, saying that sometimes Abe forgets things and maybe he really could have hurt someone without realizing, and this thought crushes Marge, who insists that her father-in-law would never harm anyone on purpose, and her voice cracks as she says he is not a monster. He is just old and alone and scared. Back in his room, Abe stares at an old photograph of himself as a young man, strong, confident, sure of who he was. And he whispers, I used to know myself, but now I cannot even trust my own memories. And as he closes his eyes, he falls into another flashback that feels real, but he cannot tell if it actually happened. He sees himself arguing with a missing man in the park. He sees his own hands shaking. He sees the man falling, or maybe being pushed, or maybe simply tripping. But everything is blurry and distorted, and Abe wakes up gasping, convinced for a moment that he did something terrible. Later that evening, a special town meeting is held at the church where Reverend Lovejoy tries to calm everyone but the citizens shout over him, demanding punishment, demanding closure, demanding someone to blame. And soon the discussion turns into a trial of public opinion, with Ned Flanders saying he wants to believe in forgiveness, but even he admits that the situation looks suspicious, and Krusty jumps onto the stage yelling that Springfield is tired of letting crimes go unpunished, and the whole room erupts in agreement, drowning out any voice of reason. In the corner, Lisa tries to defend her grandfather, saying that none of them know what really happened, but the crowd ignores her, shouting that she is too young to understand the danger. And as the noise grows louder, Grandpa Simpson slowly steps into the church doorway, and everyone freezes, staring at him like he is a ghost or a creature from a nightmare. And he says in a trembling voice, "If all of you think I did it, then maybe I did." And the room falls silent because in that single sentence, the old man confirms their greatest fear. His knees wobble and he nearly collapses as he adds, "I do not remember anything. I do not know what is real anymore." And as he stands there shaking, surrounded by angry faces, he begins to believe that he is capable of something he never would have imagined doing in his entire life. And with that confession whispered from a broken mind, Springfield decides that the case is solved and the old man must be guilty, simply because he believes it too. As the days pass, Springfield prepares to move forward with the case, convinced that Grandpa Simpson is responsible for the disappearance, and the pressure on him becomes unbearable. Inside the retirement home, Abe barely eats, barely sleeps, barely speaks, and every time he tries to remember what happened, the images become even more twisted and frightening until he no longer knows if he is remembering reality or simply repeating the accusations thrown at him by the entire town, and the line between truth and fear disappears completely. Meanwhile, Lisa refuses to accept that the investigation is over, and she continues searching for clues, retracing the final steps of the missing man. And she discovers that he was last seen near the old abandoned shed behind the park, place rarely visited because it is falling apart and filled with old tools and newspapers, and she convinces Bart to help her investigate. As they walk through the dusty floor, they find footprints that do not match Abe's shoes and a torn piece of fabric stuck on a nail. And Lisa realizes something huge. Someone else was there that night. Back at the police station, Chief Wiggum is celebrating what he calls an open and shut case, eating donuts with a sense of accomplishment. Even though he solved nothing, Lisa bursts through the door, holding the evidence, and tries to explain that the crime scene shows a second person and that Abe could not have dragged anyone alone because the footprints show someone strong and fast. But Wiggum laughs, saying the case is already closed because the suspect basically confessed, and the town feels safer that way. When Lisa tells this to Marge and Homer, they feel a spark of hope and rush to the retirement home to tell Abe the good news. But when they arrive, they find him sitting in silence, his eyes empty and tired, as he whispers, "I just want to tell the truth, but I do not know what the truth is anymore." And Marge kneels beside him, holding his shaking hands, saying, "Abe, listen to me. There is proof that you did not do anything." But the old man shakes his head, saying, "No one believes in me, not even myself anymore." At that moment, the real culprit steps forward unexpectedly. He is a neighbor who had been arguing with the missing man earlier that night and had hidden the truth out of fear and guilt. And when Lisa confronts him with evidence, he breaks down, admitting that he ran from the scene after a violent argument, leaving the man unconscious, not realizing he was still alive. And later, the man simply woke up, confused, wandered off to a cabin in the woods to clear his mind, and had no idea Springfield believed him dead until he was found by the search teams. When this truth reaches Springfield, the citizens begin to panic, realizing they accused an innocent man and that they nearly destroyed Grandpa Simpson's life. for no reason they gather around the retirement home trying to apologize, offering gifts and help and comfort, but Abe looks at them with a distant expression because something inside him has already broken beyond repair, and he says, softly, I believed you because I trusted you. I thought you knew me better than I knew myself, and now I do not know who I am anymore. Even though the town celebrates the discovery, Lisa, Bart, and Marge share a quiet moment, understanding how deeply this experience has hurt Abe and how easily fear can turn good people cruel. And as the episode closes, Grandpa Simpson sits outside, watching the sunset, saying, sometimes the worst. Prison is inside your own mind, and the others sit with him silently, letting him know he is not alone. And with the weight of the entire town lifted at last, the narrator closes this story, reminding us that Springfield can be chaotic, loud, and unfair, but at the end of the day, truth always finds its way through the noise, even when everyone else tries to bury it. And now, if you watch this far, make sure to subscribe, because the next story from Springfield is even darker and even stranger, and you are not going to believe what happens next.